was King Street Boys.
That's just a phony title.
Oh, it's just there.
Like you're in the back alley of,
Yeah, we're ready.
somewhere in the back alley, somewhere down.
Are you ready? Perry, for people who don't know, can you give me kind of a summary of who was Bruce Lee and why has he become such an icon?
Well, Bruce Lee has basically become a role model. He's kind of set the standard for the martial arts, and people that like me who grew up, seeing him, he became this powerful image of this Asian male professional person that we have always looked up to.
What do you think? What is it about Bruce Lee that has sort of pulled from you this sort of fascination with him and his life? What is it about him that drew you to him?
Bruce Lee had incredible talent. Bruce Lee had this sense of arrogance. He was this provide this image of role models for Asians at this time when there was really no powerful image of an Asian person. Plus, he had this incredible athletic ability, and at that time, he never saw very many Asians that were very athletic. He basically provided this strong image of a person that could take care of himself.
And you think of him, though, as more than a martial arts fighter. I mean, there are many other facets of him that you were drawn to. What are some of those?
Bruce Lee was more than a martial artist. The whole purpose of this exhibit, anytime you have an exhibit of this type, you're always trying to show that person to be more than just a martial artist. Bruce Lee was a philosopher. He was a visionary. He was an innovator. He was very artistic. Bruce Lee overcame discrimination. He overcame the stigma of interracial marriage. He was a husband, a warrior. Essentially, like John Little said in his the many books that he wrote, Bruce Lee was essentially an artist of life.
Tell us about the exhibit here. What is the sort of purpose? How has this been laid out so people could have a little more information?
We started this exhibit to honor Bruce Lee on his 30th anniversary. Also, too, this exhibit is set up to raise money for housing down here in the International District. This exhibit takes you through the different stages of Bruce Lee's life. We created these settings into 9 different rooms. We have a room that's set up to give you a feel that you're in Hong Kong. We have a room that gives you a feel that at any time Bruce Lee can walk in and sit in front of his makeup mirror in the sound stage. We created a room that replicates 1966 living room, a toy store, his Hollywood period, a philosophy room. We recreated the size of his kun or dojo down here in the International District, and we filled it with all the original artifacts from that time period. And then we have a legacy room which honors his contribution to the martial arts.
How did you
That back again to, I might interject once in a while, but
Yeah.
Just in general, what you're trying to, I mean, you have each individual room, but can you ask again, just in a general way, what that you're showing his whole life, or what?
less specific is what you want? Sort of.
Less specific.
Well, just tell us what are you trying to show here in this exhibit about Bruce Lee?
Well, we're just trying to take you through the different stages of Bruce Lee's life. We want to show you periods where Bruce Lee, the Hong Kong period where Bruce Lee grew up in, and this going into his Hollywood period. Then we're taking you through toys and memorabilia that were merchandised during the time period that promoted Bruce during that show, and then his struggle to make it through Hollywood, and then his entry into the movie business in Hong Kong, and then we're taking you through a room that's filled with his philosophy, and then from there we replicated a school, the size of his school down here in the International District, and filled it with his personal artifacts from that time period.
So all of these facets of Bruce Lee's life for you kind of add up to what? I mean, what feeling do you have?
Well, it shows Bruce as more of a very complete person. With any exhibit of a person who has this icon status, it's just to show you that he was more than a martial artist. That he was an innovator, he was a visionary, he was very artistic. Um, he let's forget it.
Let's start there.
Okay.
Dave,
Okay.
can you actually come over and just kind of stand still? Sorry, it was squeaking over there.
Yeah, okay.
Those guys are coming through. Oh, okay.
So these different facets of Bruce Lee's life that are here in this.
Can you come back for your hand gestures are coming into the front.
So these different aspects of Bruce Lee's life that are on exhibit here for you, what do those total to? What does that mean to you?
It shows you as a complete human being, that Bruce Lee was more than a martial artist. That's what we're trying to show in this exhibit, that Bruce Lee was more than a martial artist, that he was a philosopher, he was an innovator, he was a visionary, that he was very artistic, that Bruce Lee was able to overcome discrimination in Hollywood, that he overcame an interracial marriage, that he was a husband, he was a warrior, and essentially he was an artist of life.
Tell me how you got started collecting all of these items about and for Bruce Lee.
I first, while attending Franklin High School back in 1966, during a boys' assembly, Bruce Lee and Taky Kimura came to do this martial arts demonstration, and they came in and Bruce put on the most incredible demonstration I've ever seen in my life. I was simply mesmerized by his flexibility, his power, his control. After seeing a demonstration like that, I felt that I had to meet him, and I went up to his school, and it took me like an hour and a half to get up there on a bus. And I did meet with him, but I realized at that time, being 14 years old, I wouldn't be able to train under him because being 14 years old, my mother wouldn't allow me to spend that much time traveling, training, and coming back home and not get my homework done. Afterwards, I did see Bruce Lee demonstrate several other times around Seattle. And the next time that I saw Bruce, he was Kato on the Green Hornet. And of course, this was the first time that I saw this image of this, positive, powerful image of an Asian actor. And obviously, the connection was made. And 37 years later, I have one of the largest collection of Bruce Lee memorabilia in the world.
How big is your collection, and where do you get all this stuff?
Well, it's hard to say how big my collection is. I have probably close to 10,000 to 15,000 different items. Most of Bruce Lee collectible items are magazines and toys. But you start collecting by trading with your friends. You find a lot of stuff nowadays, of course, on eBay, trade magazines, comic book conventions, the stores that sell his image on, of course, magazines, and a lot of toy stores that sell action figures.
How did this exhibit itself get started?
Well, we talked about putting on an exhibit to honor Bruce Lee on his 30th anniversary, also as a means of raising money for interim for low-income housing. So Bob Santos, who is the head of interim, talked to me about putting on the exhibit, and we, of course, contacted the Bruce Lee estate, and we got permission, and within 6 months, we were able to put this exhibit together.
Tell me a little bit about Bruce Lee as an Asian role model for young men, young women.
Well, Bruce Lee as a role model nowadays is a lot different than it was for me growing up back in 1966. Back in 1966, the only image that you saw of a person that was Asian on TV was Hop Sing on Bonanza, and of course Charlie Chan, which is usually played by a Caucasian actor. Nowadays, kids don't see him as being a role model as much as they probably see Jackie Chan and Jet Li. But to me, back 30 years ago, he was the first image of this, positive professional person who, at that time was really quite different than any other Asian to come along. He was You know, he's very athletic. He was very arrogant at that time, and still is today.
Why do you think Bruce Lee has maintained this sort of top status as a martial arts artist? There are others, and you mentioned some of those, Jackie Chan. Why do you think he has sort of maintained that status as the top dog?
Well, Bruce Lee still sets the standards. There's really nobody to come along that, you know, has that athletic ability, the arrogance, that totality that he has. You know, Bruce Lee, you know, really is to the martial arts what Michael Jordan is to basketball, and what Elvis is to music. You know, he will always set the standard until somebody else comes along.
And what does Bruce Lee mean to you? Why has he been so important to you?
Well, he's just been a positive influence in my whole life. I simply, you know, to me he was just different. You know, the way he carried himself. You know, the way he spoke his mind. You know, he was simply a role model for me growing up.
Can you sort of visualize that moment when you saw him doing this martial arts demonstration? I mean, what was that impact like for you as you were 14?
Well, everything that Bruce Lee did was spontaneous. You know, to this very day, I've never seen anybody demonstrate the same way Bruce Lee demonstrated. You know, at that time that I watched him demonstrate, he would always invite somebody from the audience to come down, and unrehearsed, he would ask that person to attack them. And you know, to this very day, I've never seen anybody demonstrate that way. You know, there were people who were very good fighters. There were street fighters, and I knew they were real good at fighting. And yet, Bruce Lee was able to simply control that person. You know, I never saw anybody with the speed, the flexibility, the power that Bruce Lee exerted in all his demonstrations.
And you've taken that feeling and what you got from that, and you've sort of moved it into this world of collecting. What was the first thing, or what was the beginning of that collecting phase for you?
Probably the first item that I ever collected on Bruce was the 1967 October Black Belt magazine. That was the first time that I saw Bruce Lee on the cover of a magazine. Before that, I had bought a couple of the Green Hornet toys that were connected to the series. But you know, over the years, I've been able to pick up a lot more of these toys that were regional at that time through the different trade magazines and through eBay.
And can you tell me about maybe a few of the sort of what you think are the most valuable items?
I would say right now the most valuable Bruce Lee items, of course, would be the Green Hornet toys and a lot of his personal artifacts, which I was able to buy through the auctions that his wife, you know, held about 10 years ago, and just through people who knew Bruce Lee that were willing to part with items that he had. You know, I've developed a close relationship with his family and with a lot of his close students over the years.
Could you tell me about sort of the feeling for you about owning this stuff? I mean, is it about owning it or having a really big collection, or you know, why is having these pieces important to you? What does that mean to you that you have them?
Well, sometimes it's bragging rights with other collectors. A lot of it is just this feeling that you own something that that person actually touched or, you know, handled. Also because it's worth, you know, it's an investment too.
So Ralph, do you want to now head out to some?
Over by U Village, back by the Burgermaster back there.
Oh yeah, my old stomping grounds
Oh, yeah?
from high school.
Is that right? Okay.
Well,
The
you
Berg.
went.
the Berg, in that area there. Did you grow up in that area, or did you?
Roosevelt.
In terms of where you live, though, or?
More by Green Lake. But I used to hang at the Berg, you know.
That was the place. Or Dick's on 45th.
Well, that was the deal. You would just drive back and forth.
Right. Fill your gullet with fries and burgers.
So Dave, just chat with him for a while. I just need him listening.
Then we flew down to California.
Yeah, we just stumbled onto it on the Craigslist on the internet. The guy was moving out there. We've been working out of my business partner Eric's garage for the last 6 years, and it's worked fine. Just sort of need some more room, so gonna have
Studio space or
editing suites, conference room. Yeah, a real deal. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Keep talking, Dave.
just going through repainting it all, and just I'm going to do a machine room idea, so the edit suites will be quiet, won't have a bunch of stuff whizzing and going in and whatnot. So and put that together. We'll have an opening party, probably December as it's standing right now with our timeline. We'll invite one and all, check it out. So. I always had dreams of having a studio and going broke, and it's like, here's our chance. So.
Just a little more.
TV set and paint
I'm going with
retro
that.
yellow color and put those hand-painted resin kits.
That'll be good.
Those are the old earlier
That's the
TV
scene.
tornadoes from Britain.
Been
And over here.
So did you start collecting?
painting while Eric's been doing editing on something. We've been doing this 20-minute diversity training piece with Costco for the last couple of weeks. We've been shot it all green screen with the talent, with a teleprompter. They use their own in-house talent, so we've been putting that together. We got a new real-time compositing editing system that we use. So we can do 4 layers in real time. So we can do real-time green screen and all that kind of stuff. Almost like a switcher, if you will, in terms of as we're used to that way. So. How we doing?
It's just a little more.
Okay.
That came through.
Yeah, sure. So I just did our first big project in NASA. It was exciting. Eric had gone back to Boston to get training on it from Media 100. And
Costco, that's a good client.
they've been a client of ours since '97. Potentially a good client, potentially not. They're like the biggest thing in the state. They don't advertise. They don't do media. They don't do print. They don't do anything.
They don't have to.
People pay them close to $300 million for their memberships, and they're going to be doing $38 billion this year.
Okay.
You just can't imagine how appreciative that is, you know. So you're going to ask me
I'm
questions.
just going to
then?
ask you questions,
okay.
and you can just talk to me,
Yeah.
and we try and ignore
Okay,
him.
okay,
That's
fine.
the idea.
So I'll just keep my attention on you,
Right.
right?
He just wants to make you look good.
Perfect. Better than good.
Better than good.
That's going to be tough.
Yeah, that's what I tell him. Yeah.
All right. Taky, can you just come a hair over to your left? That's too much.
Too much?
That's okay.
Is that okay? How's that?
That's perfect.
Okay.
And we're rolling.
Okay, Taky, can you tell me what was your relationship with Bruce Lee?
Well, Bruce Lee and I met when he came to Seattle in 1959. Bruce had actually was an American citizen by birth, and his dad was a very famous movie star and opera star. And so during certain years, he would come over to the United States and go through all the Chinatowns and put on their skits, you know. And during one of the trips in San Francisco in 1940, Bruce was born in San Francisco, so therefore he was a citizen by birth, but went back to Hong Kong to live with his parents. And when he became 18 years of age, he got that greetings from the president, just like everybody else did in those days to serve their stint in the military. And Bruce was, you know, getting in a few fights in the street and things like that. And so his dad thought this is a fine opportunity to send him over to the United States for some education, you know. And so he pinned a $100 bill on his shirt pocket and put him on a boat, and he landed in San Francisco. He stayed there for a few months, as I recall, and then he decided to come up to Seattle. I think one of the reasons he probably came to Seattle was Ruby Chow at that time was the spokesperson for the Chinese community, and she and her husband actually was one of the components of Bruce's father's troupe for a long time, I guess. But apparently he met Ruby in the United States and married her and got out of the business of being in the opera business, and so I think that they probably felt that they owed, you know, Bruce's dad, you know, a favor, and so they probably said, "Why don't you bring him up here? We'll sponsor him up here." So he worked in the restaurant up on Broadway and Jefferson, where they had a restaurant, and worked as a busboy and went to school and taught us on the side gung fu.
And how did you actually meet Bruce? What was your first?
My family been in the grocery business for a number of years, and actually prior to my becoming in the group with Bruce, there was an original group of guys that Bruce had met, and the original student of Bruce was Jesse Glover. But in his little group of people, there was a guy named Ed Hart and Jim DeMille and Pat Hooks and, you know, a number of other people like that. A small group of people that were going to Edison vocation the same as Bruce, and they found out what a whiz this guy was, and so they started taking lessons from him just on the, in the backyards and places like that. And those guys were my friends, and one of them came in to me one day and said that they met Bruce down at the Seafair pageant in Chinatown. And they said, "You've got to meet this young guy, 18 years old, and he's the most phenomenal guy we've ever seen." And I said, "Well, how could he be that good? He's only 18 years old. And what about these Japanese martial artists, judo and karate, that are in their 30s and more, that have earned their stripes?" And he said, "Well," he said, "that may be so, but he said, this guy really has it." And so he said, "You got to meet him." And I said, "Well, how can I do that?" And they said, "Well, we're meeting in, backyards," and they were meeting down at Tubby Graves baseball field down in University of Washington Arboretum and places like that. And he said, "By the way, we're going to meeting this coming Sunday down there." And he said, "Why don't you come on down?" So I took a day off from the store and went down there. And of course, the first thing they said to me was, after I shook hands with Bruce, they said, "Go ahead and do something to him." And of course, immediately I was afraid, but that I knew I'd been hooked into something. But I just went ahead and half-heartedly threw a wild hook haymaker at him, and he blocked it, and I could feel those punches just coming, just not touching, but just coming at my head like that. And in a moment later, he had me on the ground, and it just terrified the hell out of me, But I was in need of something like that to buoy up the emptiness of insecurity and all that I was in from previous life. And when I saw Bruce move like that, I just felt that this was something that I really needed, and so I joined the group. But Bruce at the age of 18 was a very gregarious young man and full of just all kinds of activity and things. And he could be throwing a punch at your head one minute and then talking to you about something the next minute.
We know about him as this really fabulous martial arts person, but what was Bruce Lee like as a person, as a friend?
Well, I have to preface that by saying that a lot of people that, well, not a lot, but there were some people that were sort of friends of his that said he was kind of a brash guy, but if you have that kind of talent, no matter what you say, it's going to be misconstrued, And I hung out with Bruce probably as much as anybody did up here, and I was with him many times when people would try to, to put him into a spot, and he would just very calmly say, "Well, look, you got to be great. I got to go," and because he knew that if he kept on, it was going to lead him to a fight,
What do you think made him such a success?
Well, Bruce had gone through a lot, even in his young age, and he had studied not only the martial arts over there, but he studied all the philosophical things like Lao Tzu and Confucius and Taoism and Zenism and all those things. And so for a young man at that age, he was much, much older and much mature than his age represented him. And he understood a lot of things. He could look at you and just kind of understand what your dilemma was if there was such a thing. And if you were a very a gregarious, outspoken, bully type guy, he'd take that into consideration. He would just fit his personality into you, and you just couldn't help but like him. He was such a great guy.
Can you kind of put into words what Bruce Lee meant to you?
Well, if it hadn't been for Bruce Lee, I have to tell you, right at this day, I don't think that I would be anywhere near the matureness of who I am now. He took me from a person that had a lot of insecurity because of my minority status and different negative things that I'd encountered, and he was able to just kind of pick me up and understand exactly where I was. And I think the fact that he had been through a lot of that himself, even though he was reared in Hong Kong, he was able to understand that quickly, and at the same time forget about the race and things like that. But he could look at you, whether you were white, yellow, or brown, and still see some of the things that were probably insecure within yourself, and he helped you to work it out. And that's what he did with me. And so I've just kind of dedicated my life to repay him in my own way, which is just teach young kids not only just fighting, but more importantly, the philosophical essence of what life is all about.
Why do you think 30 years after his death, he is still so popular all over the world?
Well, you know, I don't think it's that hard to understand when you recognize that there are no role models out there now. I mean, Bruce is a guy that really created an image for himself in terms of not only his fighting, but more importantly, the philosophical essence of what he had inside of himself, and he just did a lot to change the perspective of humanness in the world, and so to this day, you know, he's looked upon as one of the great icons.
You have anything else, Ralph?
Have we missed anything?
Anything you would tell us about him that we haven't asked you, or that comes to mind for you?
Well, in my relationship with Bruce, I was first a friend and secondly a student. In most other cases, the guys were students and then friends. And I'm not saying that to, you know, to put a demeaning sound on what I'm saying, but Bruce and I were very close as friends, and we used to come down to Chinatown, and of course all the cooks in the back knew his father, so automatically I knew Bruce, and so he would go in there and say, well, we want this, you know. He wouldn't order off the menu. We had some real authentic food, you know, that they had, you know. But he was a guy that was just like the rest of us. He had the same fears and courage and things that everybody else does, you know. I mean, we look upon him as an icon now that place him in a position where he's very reverent, and he was. But I mean, he was just a normal guy, you know, and you know, I had a lot of fun with him doing a lot of things, and for instance, we used to go to the Japanese samurai movies, and he just loved to see the blind swordsman and some of those movies like that, and we just had a lot of fun just being friends, you know, and
What do you think he would make of this today? I mean, that there is this museum exhibit and people collect thousands of items to remember him from his life. What do you think he would think about that?
well, I think that Bruce would be really humbled and really thankful in his heart, but I don't think he would ever let it get to his head, you know. But I think it would have pleased him immensely to know that the philosophy that he stood for is being, you know, recognized throughout the world. And certainly, I think when I've talked to a lot of people, for instance, up in the cemetery, I go up there at least once a month, and sometimes I go up there 5 or 6 times, depending on whether somebody from Europe or somewhere, you know, knows that I'm out here, calls me up and said, I'd like to meet you up there. And you know, and I take time off and go up there and meet with them. And I take them out down to Chinatown. We have a little lunch and things, and show them around where Bruce and I hung out. And you just can't imagine the glee, the real thankfulness that they have in their heart when they leave, because they almost feel like they met Bruce. And I think that works every time other people like Jesse and some of those other people that were his original students, that when they take time to meet them like that. But one of the most important things, I think, is that, you know, there's so many people up there that come up there, and usually when I'm up there, I always see maybe half a dozen people before I leave, and usually I'm a kind of a humble guy, but in this case, I stick my neck out and say, gee, where are you from, and are you a martial artist? And you can't imagine how many people say they're not martial artists. And I say, well, what are you doing here then? And they tell me that they said, we've seen these movies and we know what he stood for. We're just here trying to be inspired by what kind of a person he was. And when you hear something like that, you know, it just you can't beat something like that. It shows that he's really touching people over the world.
I had
Great.
just